California Department of Motor Vehicles, CDL Handbook Audio Edition. The best way to learn is to listen. This is Section 9.1 through 9.4. Section 9, all about hazardous materials, to get your Hazmat endorsement. Note: to ensure public safety, DMV examiners will not conduct commercial skills tests in a vehicle displaying vehicle placards. This includes vehicles carrying hazardous materials and/or waste, and vehicles which have not been purged of their hazardous cargo. Hazardous materials are products that pose a risk to health, safety, and property during transportation. The term often is shortened to hazmat, which you may see on road signs, or to HM in government regulations. Now, hazardous materials include explosive, various types of gas, solids, flammable, and combustible liquid, and other materials. Because of the risk involved and the potential consequences these risks impose, all levels of government regulate the handling of hazardous materials. The hazardous materials table in the regulations contain a list of these items. However, this list is not all-inclusive. Whether or not a material is considered hazardous is based on its characteristics and the shipper's decision on whether or not the material meets a definition of a hazardous material in the regulations. Now, the regulations require vehicle transporting certain types of quantities of hazardous materials to display diamond-shaped, square-on-point warning signs, which are called placards. This section is designed to assist you in understanding your role and responsibility in hauling hazardous materials. Due to the constantly changing nature of government regulations, it is impossible to guarantee absolute accuracy of the materials in this section. It is essential for you to have an up-to-date copy of the complete regulations. Included in these regulations is a complete glossary of terms. You must have a CDL with a Hazmat hazardous materials endorsement before you drive any size vehicle that is used to transport hazardous materials, as defined in CFR Title 49 385.5. You must pass a knowledge test about the regulations and requirements to get this endorsement. Note: a CLP holder is prohibited from transporting hazmat. Now, not to worry. Everything that you'll need to know to pass the knowledge test is in this video series in section number 9. However, this is only the beginning. Most drivers need to know much more on the job. You can learn more by reading and understanding the federal and state rules applicable to hazardous materials, as well as attending hazardous materials training courses. Your employer, colleagues, universities, and various associations usually offer these courses. You can get copies of the federal regulations through your local government printing office, bookstore, and various industry publishers. Union or company offices often have copies of these rules for their drivers. Find out where you can get your own copy to use on the job. The regulations required training and testing for all drivers involved in transporting hazardous materials. Your employer or designated representative is required to provide this training and testing. Hazardous material employers are required to keep a record of training for each employee as long as that employee is working with hazardous materials and for 90 days thereafter. The regulations require that hazardous materials employees be trained and tested at least once every 3 years. All drivers must be trained in the security risks of hazardous material transportation. This training must include how to recognize and respond to possible security threats. The regulations also require that drivers have special training before driving a vehicle transporting certain flammable gas materials or highway route controlled quantities of radioactive materials. In addition, drivers transporting cargo, tanks, and portable tanks must receive special training. Each driver's employer or his or her designated representative must provide this training. Some locations require permits to transport certain explosives or bulk hazardous waste. States and counties also may require drivers to follow special hazardous material routes. The federal government may require permits or exemptions for special hazardous material cargo such as rocket fuel. Now, find out your permits, exceptions, and special routes for the places before you drive. Let's talk about permits. A permit or route inspection may be required to transport some classifications and quantities of hazardous materials. Now, contact the CHP and the DOT for information. Permits and registrations may also be required for hazardous and medical waste transportation. contact your Department of Toxic Substance Control and the Department of Health Services, respectively, for information. If you apply for an original or renewal hazmat endorsement, you must undergo a TSA Federal Security Threat Assessment or background check. You start the TSA background records check after you apply for your CDL at the DMV. Successfully complete all appropriate knowledge tests and submit a valid medical form. You must submit fingerprints, a fee, and any additional requirements information to one of the TSA designated agents. You must also provide the TSA agent with the following copy of your CDL permit and one of the following ID documents: a California driver's license or ID card, an out-of-state driver's license, your CLP accompanied by a DMV photo receipt, and the list of TSA agent sites are online. California Hazardous Material Transportation License. Now, every motor carrier who transport the following hazardous materials in California must have a Hazardous Materials Transportation License issued by the CHP. Hazardous materials shipment, for which the display of placards is required. Hazardous material shipments in excess of 500 pounds, transported for a fee, which would require placarding if shipped in greater amounts in the same manner. A valid legible copy of the carrier's Hazardous Materials Transportation License must be carried in the vehicle and be present to any peace officer or duly authorized employee of the CHP upon request. This is in addition to the federal hazmat registration that may be required under CFR Title 49-107-601. Now, what are the intent of these regulations? Well, one, the intent is to contain the material. Transporting hazardous material can be risky. The regulations are intended to protect you, those around you, and the environment. They tell shippers how to package materials safely and drivers how to load, transport, and unload the materials. These are called the containment rules. Another intent of the regulations is to communicate the risk. Shippers must warn drivers and others about the material's hazard and to communicate the risk. The regulations require shippers to put hazardous warning labels on packages, provide proper shipping papers, emergency response information, and placards. These steps communicate the hazard to the shipper, carrier, and the driver. Assure safe drivers and equipment. You must pass a knowledge test about transporting hazardous materials to get a hazardous material endorsement. To pass the test, you must know how to identify where hazardous materials, safely load the shipment, properly placard your vehicle in accordance with the rules, safely transport shipments. Learn the rules and follow them. Following the rules reduce the risk of injury from hazardous materials. Now, taking shortcuts by breaking rules is unsafe. Non-compliance with regulations can result in fines and jail. Inspect your vehicle before and during each trip. Law enforcement officers may stop and inspect your vehicle. And when you're stopped, they may check your shipping papers, vehicle placards, the hazmat endorsement on your CDL, and your knowledge of hazardous materials. 9.2. Hazardous Materials Transportation. Who does what? Well, who does what? The shipper. The shipper sends products from one place to another by truck, rail, vessel, or airplane. The shipper uses the hazardous material regulations to determine the product's ID number, proper shipping name, hazard class, packing group, correct packing, correct label and markings, correct placards, must package, mark, and label the materials, prepare shipping papers, provide emergency response information, and supply placards. The shipper must certify on the shipping paper that the shipment has been prepared according to the rule. The carrier takes the shipment from the shipper to its destination. So that would be, example, the driver of the truck is the carrier. The carrier, prior to transportation, checks that the shipment correctly is described, is marked, is labeled, and otherwise prepared the shipment for the transportation. The carrier refuses improper shipments, and the carrier reports accidents and incidents involving hazardous materials to the proper government agency. Okay, the driver. Let's talk about the driver. The driver makes sure the shipper identified, marked, and labeled the hazardous materials properly. The driver refuses leaking packages and shipments. The driver placards the vehicle when loading if required. The driver safely transports the shipment without delay. The driver follows all special rules about transporting hazardous materials. And the driver keeps hazardous material shipping papers and emergency response information in the proper place. Okay, communicating the rules. 9.3. Definitions. Some words and phrases have special meanings when talking about hazardous materials. Some of these may differ from meanings that you are used to. The words and phrases in this section may be on your test. The meaning of other important words are in the glossary at the end of this section. A material hazard class reflects the risks associated with it. Now there are 9 different hazard classes. The types of materials included in these 9 classes are in this illustration. Go ahead and take a look at the screen. A shipping paper describes the hazardous materials being transported. Shipping orders, bills of lading, and manifests are all shipping papers. After an accident or hazardous materials spill or leak, you may be injured and unable to communicate the hazards of the materials you are transporting. Firefighters and police can prevent or reduce the amount of damage or injury at the scene if they know what hazardous materials are being carried. Your life and the lives of others may depend on quickly locating the hazardous materials shipping paper. And for that reason, the rules require shippers to describe hazardous materials correctly and include an emergency response telephone number on shipping papers. Carriers and drivers to quickly identify hazardous material shipping papers or keep them on top of other shipping papers and keep the required emergency response information with the shipping papers. It requires drivers to keep hazardous material shipping papers in or on a pouch in the driver's door, clear view with immediate reach where the seat belt is fastened while driving, the driver's seat when out of the vehicle. Let's talk about package labels. Shippers put diamond-shaped hazard warning labels on most hazardous material packages. These labels inform others of the hazards. If the diamond label will not fit on the package, shippers may put the label on a tag securely attached to the package. For example, compressed gas cylinders that will not hold a label will have tags or decals. See this figure. Look at the screen, this picture here. List of regulated products. Placards. Placards are often used to warn others of hazardous materials. Placards are signs put on the outside of a vehicle and on bulk packages which identify the hazard class of the cargo. A placarded vehicle must have at least 4 identical placards. They are put on the front, the rear, and both sides of the vehicle. Placards must be readable from all 4 directions. There are at least 10 3/4 inch square on point in a diamond shape. Cargo tanks and other bulk packaging display the ID number of their contents on placards or orange panels or white square on point display that are the same size as the placards. Now, ID numbers are a 4-digit code used by first responders to identify hazardous materials. An ID number may be used to identify more than one chemical. The letter N and A, or UN, will precede the ID numbers. The U.S. Department of Transportation guidebook lists the chemicals and the ID numbers assigned to them. Now there are 3 main lists used by shippers, carriers, and drivers when trying to identify hazardous materials. Now before transporting a material, look for its name on 3 lists. Some materials are on all the lists, others are only on one. Always check the following lists: CFR Title 49 172.101, the Hazardous Materials Table, and Appendix A to CFR Title 49 172.101, the List of Hazardous Substances and Reportable Quantities, and Appendix B to CFR Title 49 172.101, the List of Marine Pollutants. The hazardous material table, Figure 9.4, shows parts of the hazardous material table. Column 1 tells which shipping mode, the entry effects, and other information concerning the shipping description. The next 5 columns show each material's shipping name, hazard class, or division ID number, packing group, and required labels. 6 different symbols may appear in column 1 of the table. Here is a picture of the table. The plus sign shows the proper shipping name, hazard class, and packing group to use, even if the material does not meet the hazard class definition. The A sign means the hazardous material described in column 2 is subject to the HMR only when offered or intended for transportation by air, unless it is a hazardous substance or waste. The W means the hazardous material described in column 2 is subject to the HMR only when offered or intended for transportation by water, unless it is hazardous substance, waste, or marine pollutant. So the A is for transportation by air, and the W is transportation by water. The D means the proper shipping name is appropriate describing materials for domestic transportation, but may not be proper for international transportation. I identifies a proper shipping name that is used to describe materials in international transportation. A different shipping name may be used when only domestic transportation is involved. Now the G means the hazardous material described in column 2 is generic shipping name. A generic shipping name must be accompanied by a technical name on the shipping paper. Now a technical name is a specific chemical that makes the product hazardous. Column 2 lists the proper shipping names and description of regulated materials. Entries are in alphabetical order so you can quickly find the right entry. The table shows proper shipping names in regular type. The shipping paper must show proper shipping names. Names shown in italics are not proper shipping names. Column 3 shows a material hazard class or division or the entry forbidden. Never transport a forbidden material. Placard hazardous materials shipments are based on the quantity and hazard class. Now you can decide which placards to use if you know these 3 things: the materials hazard class, the amount being shipped, the amount of all hazardous materials of all classes on your vehicle. Column 4 lists the ID numbers for each proper shipping name. ID numbers are preceded by the letters U or NA. Now the letters NA are associated with proper shipping names that are only used within the U.S. and to and from Canada. The ID numbers must appear on the shipping paper as part of the shipping description and also appear on the package. It also must appear on cargo tanks and other bulk packaging. Police and firefighters use this number to quickly identify the hazardous materials. Column 5 shows the packaging group in Roman numeral assigned to the material. Column 6 shows the hazardous warning label shippers must put on the packages of hazardous materials. Some products require use of more than one label due to the dual hazard being presented. And in column 7 lists the additional provisions that apply to this material. When there is an entry in this column, you must refer to the federal regulations for specific information. The numbers 1 through 6 in this column mean the hazardous material is a poison inhalation hazard, or PIH, poison inhalation hazard. Now the PIH materials have special requirements for shipping papers, marking, and placards. Now column 8 is a 3-part column showing the section numbers covering the package requirements for each hazardous material. Now note, columns 9 and 10 do not apply to transporting by the highway. Appendix A to CFR Title 49-172.101, a list of hazardous substances and reportable quantities. The DOT and EPA want you to know about spills of hazardous substances. They are named in the list of hazardous substances and reportable quantities. See figure 9.5, which is right here on your screen. Column 3 of the list shows each product's reportable quantity. When these materials are being transported in an RQ or greater in one package, the shipper displays the letters RQ on the shipping paper and package. Now, the letters RQ may appear before or after the basic description. Now, you or your employer must report any spill of these materials which occur in RQ. In the words inhalation hazard appear on the shipping paper or package, the rules require display of the poison inhalation hazard or poisonous gas placards as appropriate. These placards must be used in addition to other placards which may be required by the product's hazard class. Always display the hazard class and poison inhalation hazard placards, even for small amounts. Appendix B to CFR Title 49.172.101, List of Marine Pollutants. Now, Appendix B is a listing of chemicals that are toxic to marine life. For highway transportation, this list is only used for chemicals in a container with a capacity of 119 gallons or more without a placard or label as specified by HMR. Any bulk packages of a marine pollutant must display the marine pollutant marking, which is a white triangle with a fish and an X through the fish. Now, this marking, it is not a placard, but this marking must also be displayed on the outside of the vehicle. In addition, a notation must be made on the shipping papers near the description of the material. It must note marine pollutant. The shipping paper. Let's talk about the shipping paper. The shipping paper shown here in this picture, take a look. This is an example of a shipping paper. The shipping paper describes a shipment. A shipping paper for hazardous materials must include page numbers if the shipping paper has more than one page. The first page must tell the total number of pages. For example, page 1 of 4. The shipping paper must include a proper shipping description for each hazardous material. The shipping paper must include a shipper's certification signed by the shipper, saying that they prepared the shipment according to the regulations. Item description. Let's talk about the item description. If a shipping paper describes both hazardous and non-hazardous products, the hazardous materials must be entered first and highlighted in contrasting colors or identified by an X placed before the shipping description. The basic description of a hazardous materials includes the ID number, proper shipping name, hazard class or division, and packaging group, if any, and in that order. Now, the packaging group is displayed in Roman numerals and may be preceded by PG. The ID number, shipping name, and hazard class must not be abbreviated unless specifically authorized in the hazardous materials regulations. Now, the description must also show the total quantity and unit of measure, the number and type of packages, the letters RQ if reportable quantity. If the letters RQ appear, the name of the hazardous substance. For all materials with the letter G, which stands for generic, in column 1, the technical name of the hazardous material must be included. Shipping papers also must list an emergency response telephone number. The emergency response telephone number is the responsibility of the shipper. It can be used by emergency responders to obtain information about any hazardous material involved in a spill or fire. Now, the telephone number must be the number of the person offering the hazardous material for transportation, if the shipper offer is the emergency response information. Okay, the telephone number must be the number of an emergency or organization capable of and accepting responsibility for providing the detailed information required. Now, the person who is registered with the ERI provider must be identified on the shipping paper by name, contract number, or other unique identifying assigned by the ERI provider. Now, shippers also must provide emergency response information to the motor carrier for each hazardous material being shipped. The emergency response information, or ERI, must be able to be used away from the motor vehicle and provide information on how to safely handle incidents involving this material. At a minimum, it must include these following things. It must include a basic description and technical name. It must include immediate hazards to health. It must include risks of fire or explosion, immediate precautions to be taken in the event of an accident, immediate methods for handling fires. It must include initial methods for handling spills or leaks in absence of fires. It must include preliminary first aid measures. Such information can be on the shipping paper or some other document that includes the basic description and technical name of the hazardous material. It also must be in guidance books such as the Emergency Response Guidebook, or ERG. Motor carriers may assist shippers by keeping the ERG on each vehicle carrying hazardous materials. The driver must provide the emergency response information to any federal, state, or local authority responding to or investigating the hazardous material incident. Total quantity, number, and type of packages must appear before or after the basic description. The packaging type and the unit of measure may be abbreviated. For example, 10 CTNS, UN 1263, paint 3, PG 2, 500 pounds. Now, the shipper of hazardous wastes must put the word waste before the proper shipping name of the material on the shipping paper. For example, UN 1090, waste acetone, 3, PG2. A non-hazardous material may not be described by using a hazardous class or ID number. Shippers must keep a copy of shipping papers for a period of 2 years after the material is accepted by the initial carrier. If a shipper provides a carrier service only and is not the originator of the shipper, a carrier is required to keep a copy of the shipping paper for a period of 1 year. Important note: to view complete regulatory requirements for the transportation of hazardous materials, refer to CFR Title 49, Parts 100 through 185. Let's talk about shipper's certification. When the shipper packages hazardous materials, he or she certifies that the package has been prepared according to HMR rules. The signed shipper certification appears on the original shipping paper. The only exceptions are when a shipper is a private carrier transporting their own product and when the package is provided by the carrier. Unless a package is clearly unsafe or does not comply with HMR, you may accept the shipper certification concerning the proper packaging. Some carriers have additional rules about transporting hazardous materials. Follow your employer's rules when accepting shipments. Package markings and labels. Shippers print required markings directly on the package or an attached label or tag. An important package marking is the name of the hazardous material. It is the same name as the one on the shipping paper. The requirements for marking vary by package size and material being transported. When required, the shipper will put the following on the package: the name and address of shipper or consignee, the hazardous material shipping name and ID number, the labels required. It is a good idea to compare the shipping paper to the markings and labels. Always make sure that the shipper shows the correct basic description on the shipping paper and verifies that the proper labels are shown on the package. If you are not familiar with the material, ask the shipper to contact your office. If rules require it, the shipper will put RQ, marine pollutant biohazard, hot or inhalation hazard on the package. Packages with liquid containers inside will also have package orientation markings with arrows pointing in the correct upright direction. The labels used always reflect the hazardous class of the product. If a package needs more than one label, the labels must be closer together near the proper shipping name. Recognizing hazardous materials. Learn to recognize shipments of hazardous materials. To find out if the shipment includes hazardous materials, look at the shipping papers. Does it have an entry with a proper shipping name, hazard class, and ID number? Does it have a highlighted entry or one with an X or RQ in the hazardous materials column? Now, other clues suggest hazardous materials would be: what business is the shipper in? Is he a paint dealer, a chemical supply, scientific supply house, pest control, explosive, munitions, or fireworks dealer? Are there tanks with diamond labels or placards on the premises? What type of package is being shipped? Cylinders and drums are often used for hazardous material shipments. Is a hazard class label proper shipping name or ID number on the package? Are there any handling precautions? Hazardous Waste Manifest. When transporting hazardous waste, you must sign by hand and carry a uniform hazardous waste manifest. The name and EPA registration numbers of the shippers, carriers, and destination must appear on the manifest. Shippers must prepare, date, and sign by hand the manifest. Treat the manifest as a shipping paper when transporting the waste. Only give the waste shipment to another registered carrier or disposal treatment facility. Each carrier transporting the shipment must sign by hand the manifest. After you deliver the shipment, keep your copy of the manifest. Each copy must have all needed signatures and dates, including those of the person to whom you delivered the waste. Placarding. Let's talk about placarding. Attach the appropriate placards to the vehicle before you drive it. You are only allowed to move an improperly placarded vehicle during an emergency to protect life or property. Placards must appear on both sides and ends of the vehicle. Each placard must be easily seen from all directions. Must be placed so the words or numbers are level and read from left to right, at least 3 inches away from another markings. Kept clear of attachments or devices such as ladders, doors, and tarpaulins. Kept clean and undamaged so that the color, format, and messages are easily seen. Must be affixed to the background of contrasting color. Now, the use of "Drive safely" and other slogans are prohibited. The front placard may be on the front of the tractor or trailer. To decide which placards to use, you need to know the hazard class of the material, the amount of hazardous material, the total weight of all classes of hazardous material. Placard tables. There are 2 placard tables, Table 1 and Table 2. Table 1 materials must be placarded whenever any amount is transported. See this figure here. Now, except for bulk packaging, the hazardous class in Table 2 need placards only if the total amount transported is 1,001 pounds or more, including the package. Now, add the amounts from all shipping papers for the Table 2 products you have on board. You may use dangerous placards instead of separate placards for each Table 2 hazard class when you have 1,001 pounds or more of 2 or more Table 2 hazard classes requiring different placards, and you have not loaded 2,205 pounds or more of any 2 hazard class material at any one place. The dangerous placard is an option, not a requirement. You can always placard the material. If the words "inhalation hazard" are on the shipping paper or package, you must display "poison gas" or "poison inhalation" placards, in addition to any other placards needed by the product's hazard class. The 1,000-pound exception does not apply to these materials. Materials with the secondary hazard of dangerous when wet must display dangerous when wet placard in addition to any other placards needed by the product's hazard class. The 1,000-pound exception to placarding does not apply to these materials. Placards used to identify the primary or subsidiary hazard class of a material must have the hazard class or division number displayed in the lower corner of the placard. Permanently affixed subsidiary hazard placards with the hazard class number may be used as long as they stay within the color specifications. Placards may be displayed for hazardous materials even if not required, so long as the placard identifies the hazardous of the material being transported. Bulk packaging is a single container with a capacity of 119 gallons or more. A bulk package and a vehicle transporting a bulk package must be placarded even if it is only the residue of a hazardous material. Now, certain bulk packages only have to be placarded on the two opposite sides or display labels. All other bulk packages must be placarded on all four sides. Now it's time to test your knowledge. I'll ask you a few questions, and you should know the answer in your mind. If you don't, please re-listen to this video. Also, I do have a video on the hazardous DMV test with all the answers. Please watch that video as well. Question number 1. Shippers package in order to blank the material. Number 2. Drivers placard their vehicle to blank the risk. Number 3. What 3 things do you need to know to decide which placards you need? Number 4. A hazardous materials ID number must appear on the blank and on the blank. The ID numbers must also appear on cargo tanks and other bulk packaging. Number 5. Where must you keep shipping papers describing hazardous materials? Now remember, these questions may be on your DMV test. If you cannot answer them all, please re-listen to this section 9.1, 9.2, and 9.3. We've completed 9.3, and we will begin in our next video, section 9.4.